this afternoon. Before I introduce our distinguished speaker, I would like to remind all of our members that we have our Congressional Caucus coming up June 15th and 16th. It takes place at the Washington Court Hotel. For those of you who have attended, you know it's a great event. For those of you who haven't, it's about time you join us. We can accommodate a few more, so please join us June 15th and 16th. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like to tell all of our attendees that to ask a question, please use the chat room function, which is on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Our speaker has graciously agreed to take some questions at the end of her presentation. So with no further ado, let me introduce you to Jenny Farrar, who has been a country officer in the Office of American Citizen Services Near East and South Central Asia Division for 5 years, covering India, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Maldives, Libya, and Iran. She joined the department in 2010 after graduating from the School of Law at the College of William and Mary, and worked in the Passport Services Directorate's legal office for a year before moving to ACS. I have to say a very heartfelt and thank you to Jenny for taking time from her schedule to provide us with this very relevant and timely content. So with this, let me turn it over to Jenny, and thank you very much.
Sure, thanks for that introduction, and hi everyone. I am going to present for about 20 minutes, hopefully, and then there will be some time at the end for questions. So I'm going to do a general overview of my office's responsibilities and the services we can provide you and your clients. And I'm going to include a bit of a deeper dive into our consular information program. I know there's some interest in that, travel warnings, travel alerts, et cetera. And then we will get to the questions. So without further ado, the Office of Overseas Citizen Services, where I work, is a DC-based office. We work closely with our consular associates at our embassies and consulates around the world. We give them policy guidance, so we sort of set the overall standards and systems that we use to provide services, and then we provide them sort of advice when they have questions about specific cases, and we provide them support on those individual cases. And then third, we are their connection back to the department. So all of the resources that the State Department has here in DC, we're sort of the link to our consular colleagues overseas. Just to give you a little bit of a framework, U.S. citizens make more than 80 million trips abroad every year, and there are approximately 8.3 million U.S. citizens who reside overseas. And 300,000 of those trips are U.S. students who are studying abroad, some of our best customers. So our goal is pretty much to help U.S. citizens by giving them information they need to stay safe. So the idea is to avoid having to encounter us overseas. If your trip ends with some type of interaction with the embassy or a consulate, then something has gone wrong. It's probably not a very good trip. People don't often call me at the end of a successful vacation and say, gosh, I just had the best time in India and nothing bad happened at all. That doesn't happen. So that leads us to our consular information program, and that is composed of all of these items below. So we are of the opinion that a well-informed traveler is a safer traveler, and all of these products, all of our consular information is housed on our website, travel.state.gov. Our consular information is sort of, altogether is our best objective assessment. It comes from information that we get from our posts overseas, from the other department bureaus here, like diplomatic security, counterterrorism, the political offices, the economic bureau, human rights, that sort of thing, from open media sources, and then from other foreign and U.S. government sources. We focus on safety and security without regard to political or economic considerations. That's the goal. So I'll start with our country-specific information pages. The way I see these are, they provide you things you don't know you didn't know. They are sort of to head off problems before they become problems. There's a lot of laws and customs and policies overseas as experienced travel operators, I'm sure you all know, that you don't even think are laws until you get there and break them and get in trouble. So there is a country-specific information page for every country in the world. And just to start off with, they have the location of the U.S. Embassy and Consulate in that country and contact info for the Embassy and Consulate. That is probably the most important thing that we can provide to you. Then it includes all sorts of interesting background information on each country. They tend to be pretty long because they're written with heavy consultation by our folks at Post, and so they're really the experts, and they bring their expertise and their knowledge of what they've learned about the country by living there and experiencing cases and helping folks and put them into these CSIs. So I highly recommend you read them. They can be hilarious, really, really funny. They include things like crime and security information. My favorite, which I think we've taken down or edited now, was Brazil's. If you read the CSI for Brazil, it was like basically if you step foot in Brazil, you will die immediately. There was a lot of security concerns, including exploding manhole covers. And my favorite one, which was steer clear of Brazilian prostitutes because they may rob you. I would think that there are probably some other reasons to steer clear of Brazilian prostitutes, but that is apparently Post's primary concern. So those are the kinds of things that are that really crack you up when you read them. But they do have important information, like unusual immigration policies. Saudi Arabia, for example, has for dual nationals, for citizens who are Saudi, they can get a special dispensation to travel to Saudi Arabia without having a Saudi passport. But what they don't tell you is that you have to get a Saudi passport once you get there, and that can take up to 2 years. So we have people who get stuck there waiting for their Saudi passport, who maybe don't even have any background with the country. They're just there waiting for their passport. They have information about health conditions, links to the CDC, unusual currency and entry regulations. So in one of my countries, India, for example, it's illegal to bring satellite phones into India, even if they don't work. You can't bring them in, and we've had several folks who've been arrested just for having them in their possession. There's information about drug penalties, and then some types of special types of travelers, religious travelers, the LGBT community, that sort of thing. So definitely take a look at the CSIs. Next, we will talk about travel warnings, which I know is sort of a hot topic. Travel warnings are a really big deal for the department. I don't want to give the impression that it's something we take lightly. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about how we, what they are, and then how we come to decide that it's important to have one. Travel warnings talk about long-term protracted conditions that make a country dangerous or unstable. And so we issue a travel warning when we want people to really consider whether they should go to a country at all. Examples include like unstable government, civil wars, intense crime or violence, terrorist attacks, that sort of thing. We want you to know the risks of traveling and then strongly consider not going at all, or consider what steps you can take to ameliorate your risk a little bit. It's really important to read the whole travel warning. There's different types, and that becomes clear when you start to read a few of them. We want people to be realistic about the help we can give you. So the travel warning for Iraq, for example, is going to be very different than the travel warning for Israel. If you look at the travel warning for Israel, it says our main concern there is that in addition to sporadic violence and terrorist attacks, there's very little help that we can offer people in some parts of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. If we can't get to you, then you have no backup plan. If you get stuck in Gaza, you get stuck in Gaza. We cannot make the Israelis open the border. There's nothing we can do for you. And so that is, not necessarily because the country is so dangerous you shouldn't go there, but because we can't help you if something were to happen. Iraq, for example, you shouldn't go there. I mean, if you read that one, that's just a completely different, type of warning. And so I think if you don't take anything else home from this, read the travel warnings and try to get a feeling about what it is we're saying in the warnings. They are extremely cumbersome for us to produce. There's probably 15 offices, maybe more, who contribute information and then who have the ability to clear or to veto on these warnings. So it's really a balancing act. There's competing interests even within the department. Obviously, our number one priority is the safety and security of American citizens, but we have different offices such as the Regional Security Office or Diplomatic Security here at the department, the Bureau of Counterterrorism, all of our security folks who are really tied in and worried about the threats that exist. And they are generally more eager to issue a travel warning. Then on the other side, we have the political officers, the economic officers, often an embassy's front office, so the ambassador, people who have to maintain relationships with host country folks in order to get their jobs done, people who are in charge of our public diplomacy efforts and outreach. Those folks are usually a little bit more hesitant because host countries, not surprisingly, do not like travel warnings. And so when we have to put up a travel warning, often those are the folks who sort of suffer the blowback from the host country government. So the consular people, my office, is sort of stuck in the middle. We have to balance the security interests on one side versus the political and economic and other interests on the other side. And so to get and each of these offices has veto power, and each of them has input into the language. So by the time we actually get a travel warning and then clear it by the highest levels at the department, it has, unless there's something drastic that's happened to inspire a travel warning, it has been thoroughly vetted and rehashed, and the debate over whether to have one has been had multiple times. So I don't want you to think that this is something we take lightly. It's an extremely cumbersome process, which is one of the reasons why we do travel warnings countrywide and we don't do them for different regions of countries. I know this is a recurring concern. We don't want to give there's several reasons why we do that. One is that we don't want to give the impression that the areas that we're not mentioning are safe. We don't want to say, you can travel to the north of India, that's fine. Well, actually, you can travel to the south of India, that's fine, but the north of India is a no-go. Because we don't know that the south of India is fine. We just know that there are security concerns in the north of India. And given how hard it is to get a travel warning cleared and produced, it's not something that can react to changing conditions quickly. Obviously India doesn't have a travel warning, so that's probably not the best example, but the Philippines, for example, there's parts of the Philippines that are very concerning. But we have a travel warning for the whole country, even though there's parts of the Philippines that are probably fine. We want to provide guidance and then allow people to use their own judgment. We don't want to replace people's judgment. We don't want to guarantee that there's an area that's safe or even write the warning in a way that suggests that we think there's parts of the country that are perfectly safe, because we want people to think about it and analyze it for themselves. We don't know that it's perfectly safe, and we don't want to make that representation. There's also, we get our information for these travel warnings from a lot of different sources, including many different government agencies, from the intelligence community, from the CDC, from the FAA, et cetera. Lots of different agencies, and some are more sensitive than others about how specific we are with the information we provide. So sometimes not even within the department, but actually with external partners, we have to be careful about what information we can share, since these are, the whole point of them is that they're public. I will be happy to talk about travel warnings more during the question and answers, but now we're going to move on to travel alerts, which are, we use these for short-term conditions, generally within a particular country, occasionally regionally, that pose imminent risk to security. So these expire automatically after 6 months. They're usually things like election season or hurricane season, something like that. And then we have security and emergency messages, which are for very imminent, very short-term events. So demonstrations, sometimes in South Central Asia we see a lot of like strikes or political isolated political violence that happens in specific areas that the embassy wants people to know about, immediately. And so that is what we would use a security or an emergency message for. Our worldwide caution is also found on TravelStategov, and that provides background about threats that we see worldwide. And then we occasionally provide fact sheets for specific events like the World Cup or the Olympics, something that's going to involve a lot of U.S. citizens traveling to a certain place. So our consular information program is based on the no double standard principle, which is that if we have information, if the U.S. government has information, and we share it with the official U.S. community, so the embassy officials, we have to also share it with all the American citizens in the country. We have to make it available for the non-official community as well, if the underlying threat applies to both communities. So if there's a threat that's specific and that's credible and that's non-counterable, and it is shared with the U.S. government folks in country, we are required to also share it with everyone else in country to make it available to all U.S. citizens. So that also comes into play with security emergency messages and with travel warnings. So moving on, this is travel.state.gov. You can see, this is our landing page. You can see where to click for country information, for the U.S. Embassy information. Up at the top right corner where you see Find U.S. Embassies and Consulates, that will give you contact information and links to the websites for all of our embassies and consulates. And also take a look up at the top bar. There's a link to the passport area, to the study abroad page, and to our adoption and abduction pages. Next, this is an example of a country-specific information page. This one is for Nepal, obviously. You can see on the right-hand side, there's all of the contact information, and then there's the links, the drop-down boxes down below that will give you information about those specific topics. These are updated every year, and if there is a travel alert or travel warning for the country, they'll be at the top. You see the Nepal one right there. And there will also be links to any security or emergency messages on the top. So the Nepal topic brings us to the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. The point of this is sort of so that we know you're there and so that you know that any information that we have. It works sort of both ways. We want people to enroll so that we have a general idea of how many people we have in a country in case of a crisis. Of where they are, of what type of traveler they are, what type of assistance we might need to offer them if something were to happen. Obviously, most people probably don't enroll in STEP, so our numbers are a little tricky. But it's good to have a general idea of how many people we're responsible for in the country. That is to our benefit. To your benefit, it allows us to contact you easily and quickly with updated information. Everyone who is enrolled in STEP will get an immediate bunch of information about the country that they're enrolled for, and then they will also, if there needs to be updates, so if a travel warning comes up or if there's a security message or an emergency message, that will automatically be pushed out to you to the email address and to the, sometimes by SMS or text message, depending on your preferences and depending on the post. This also gives us the ability, gives you the ability to put in a Privacy Act waiver in advance. The general idea of the Privacy Act is that the U.S. government can't share any information that it has about the U.S. citizen without their permission. So if something were to happen to someone in one of your tour groups overseas, we can't share any information or any information we have about their status or about assistance that we are giving them with you, with a family member, with anyone, unless we have that Privacy Act waiver from them. So this allows you, STEP allows you to put Privacy Act waivers into the system so that we have them in case of emergency. If you look at the tiny text at the bottom, right under where it says Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, there's a link that says Create Organization/Group Account. And that is where you all can go in and put in all of your tour participants so that they don't have to go and enroll themselves, if that's your preference. So now we'll get into some other, just some other general information about the services we provide. I think you all could probably speak to the details of overseas medical insurance a lot more than I could, but just the general takeaway is make sure the policies work overseas and make sure that it covers medevacs. We get a lot of questions about using U.S. government, U.S. military resources to evacuate people. That doesn't happen. If you get sick overseas and need to be medevaced, that you're going to need to rely on a private insurance policy in most cases. The other assistance for emergencies, we have arrests. There were almost 9,000 arrests overseas of U.S. citizens in 2014. Hopefully, if you read the CSIs, then that can help you avoid encountering overseas law enforcement. We can provide emergency passports. Almost 42,000 emergency passports were issued overseas in 2014. We can help you identify resources and contact family members in a medical emergency. Welfare and whereabouts is kind of a catch-all that we use for people who are either missing or who just need some kind of assistance. So we get a lot of, I cover India, I have a lot of like young hiker, spiritual enlightenment type folks who are traveling over there, and they often aren't the best at keeping in touch with their parents, shockingly. So I get a lot of calls from worried parents who want to know exactly where their precious 18-year-old is, who is shuffling around the country barefoot looking for spiritual enlightenment. And so that's what we would call a welfare and whereabouts case. I would sort of try to help connect the embassy with the family, or try to reassure the family that this is not uncommon, and that little Timmy will probably call in next time he gets to an internet cafe. And then obviously in a crisis, we have all sorts of tools that we can call on to help. There's a 24/7 operations center at the State Department that manages the entire department, and then there's also a duty officer for my office on duty 24 hours a day, and a duty officer at every post overseas. So when something happens, there is someone available to you. This is other types of routine assistance. We can help with deaths overseas. About 11,000 U.S. citizens died overseas in 2014. Most of these are long-term residents overseas, expats. Then we can provide some financial assistance for folks who are destitute and stuck overseas. We repatriated about 1,300 U.S. citizens in 2014. We have connections with victims assistance agencies that we can hook people up with who need it. Citizenship documentation. This is U.S. citizens who are born overseas. We registered 66,854 overseas births in fiscal year 2014. And then there's also voting assistance for folks who are resident overseas or happen to be overseas during voting. So this is notable standard. We already spoke about that. It's just reiterating the importance of this principle. And now the last topic is the Overseas Security Advisory Council. This was created in 1985. It's a public-private partnership. Basically, the increase in terrorism and threats to U.S. interests overseas forced many American companies to look for advice and assistance from the State Department. A primary goal of OSAC is to develop an effective security communication network. So basically, they try to provide information and then a forum for sharing best practices and provide tools to deal with security incidents. There are over 3,500 U.S. companies, educational institutions, and other organizations are members of OSAC right now, and we have over 16,000 users. Probably the most interesting thing is the groups that OSAC forms to enable people to share information with each other. There are regional groups, so study abroad programs from Harvard might be in the same group as hotel chains or restaurant chains that all operate in the same region. But then there are also common interest councils, which are groups that loop together specific sectors across geographic regions. So there's one for academia, one for aviation groups, one for energy, one for media and entertainment. You get the idea. These are more subject matter related rather than geographic. Obviously, you can belong to more than one type of group so that you can make sure to share information with people who are going to be most helpful to you. More information about OSAC is at osac.gov, and it's really great. I encourage you to take a look at it. So this is a recap of where our information is found, travel.state.gov, and from travel.state.gov you can get to the Students Abroad page and the Inter-Country Adoption page. And that is all I have. This is our 1-800 number if you are calling domestically, and then from overseas, obviously you can't call 1-800 number, so there's the 202, and all of the various social media tools that we are available through. I think I've exceeded my 20 minutes by just a few minutes, so I think I'm ready for questions that any of you may have.
Actually, Jenny, this is Terry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, why don't I kick things off with a couple of questions that were sent to me. And one of them has, or is in regards to notification when warnings or alerts are issued to countries. And is there any kind of system that our tour operators could sign on to where we would automatically be notified that, let's say, Nepal, the warning or alert has been changed? Or is it the tour operator's responsibility to continuously go to the website to educate him or herself on possible changes in these communications?
Sure. So there is. The answer is yes and no. For travel warnings, we can't change them without reissuing them, meaning that we have to go through the whole process of clearance again. And so for all travel warnings, will be sent out as though they are brand new every time that we try to change them. So if you are enrolled in STEP, for that particular country, you will get a notification automatically when a travel warning is reissued. For a travel alert, we don't update them very often, but that would also, I don't think that would send an immediate notification in STEP. I'm not sure about that. But STEP would also get you immediately any security and emergency messages. They would be sent to you.
Okay, great. And then if I could just ask you to elaborate on the STEP program in a little more detail. And let's use Brussels as a recent example. And what our member is asking is there a way to coordinate messaging? So let's say our tour operator has a family of 6 in Brussels, and they're communicating where to meet the on-ground professional to help get them to safety or to help with transferring them someplace. And yet through the STEP program, the government may be saying, no, don't go there, go to this alternative location. Mm-hmm. Is there any way to somehow synchronize communication between the STEP program and the tour operator so we're not confusing the customer?
Well, I'm not sure, because things are continuing, in a crisis like that, things are continuing to develop. So I'm not sure how we would be able to sync up messages in advance. So okay. The way that we would send out a message in Brussels, we issued an immediate emergency message and included all of the details that we had at that time. And then we issued subsequent emergency messages as we got more information. Because it's our priority to just get the information out to everybody as quickly as possible, I don't know how, other than just suggesting that the tour operators keep a close eye, like enroll in steps so they're getting them, and then right. Keep a close eye on what we're saying. I don't know, I'm not sure how else we would sync up beforehand. Yeah,
okay, fair enough. And then just curious.
I can also mention our Twitter account, which is at TravelGov for quick information.
Perfect. And then I'm just curious, does your department or the Department of State have any kind of consumer education campaign or program to try and educate the U.S. traveler about the difference between warnings and alerts? Because I think there's a huge amount of confusion out there amongst the population, and I think they just kind of use an alert or a warning or interpret it as being almost one in the same. So I'm just wondering, is there any kind of education that goes on to try and help clarify these types of communications?
Sure. So we do, we have been doing a lot of focused revamping of the website to try to make clear upfront the differences between them. I think there's actually a pretty good explanation if you go to TravelStategov, the warnings and alerts and warnings page right now. There's a little paragraph on each of them up front. We also do targeted outreach to specific groups. So we're often at, we go to a lot of study abroad conferences. We go to a lot of conferences for tour operators. We do like some AARP type conferences to try to get our message out to as many people as possible. And then we also have sort of through our social media, we try to emphasize, basically we try to emphasize the message, go to our website and read the warnings. I think, you know, it's difficult to get people to read the whole text as opposed to just see, oh, there's a travel warning, that means I can't go there. But I think, you know, we're pushing really hard now to get people to read the whole thing to see exactly what it is we're talking about.
Okay. Well, my ears perked up when I heard you mention that you go to some conferences. So maybe if you're available and interested in Scottsdale, Arizona, December 7th through the 9th, you could join us out there.
I think Scottsdale sounds like a lovely place to be in December.
Exactly. Well, I don't see any other questions. John, is there anything from your end?
So just I want to remind everyone, if you have a question, you should be able to type it into the chat or the Q&A portion, and it should show up for everyone. Jenny, I don't know if you saw, there's a question from Rosina. First off, thanks for a great presentation. You mentioned the travel warnings are very thoroughly vetted. What about the travel alerts? Could you tell us more about, for example, how the continent-wide Europe travel alert was set?
Sure. So travel alerts that are regional, such as like the Europe one, those are going to be vetted almost as thoroughly as a travel warning. I mean, really, something that's that broad is going to be produced in the same way. We're going to get information from folks across the spectrum within the department and then external, you know, U.S. government sources. And then it's going to be, you know, frankly argued about quite a lot before it makes the job of our political folks and our economic folks and our sort of high-level diplomats in various countries, it makes their job a lot more difficult once there is a travel alert or a travel warning. And so we have to run it through them and satisfy them as to the language and while not diluting, you know, the concerns of the security folks. So a regional travel alert is going to be hashed out pretty much in the same way as a travel warning. It's just that it's not, we don't think that the situation is dangerous enough to say don't go to Europe at all. We're just saying here are things you should think about before traveling to Europe. Does that answer the question?
I think so. And I believe we got another follow-up question from Dan, who's asking whether you could provide any insight as to why this particular one was set up for all of Europe.
I can't. I'm sorry. Since since my specialty is the Middle East and South Central Asia, I can't speak to that one.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if that's the extent of the questions, I just want to send a very sincere thank you to Jenny for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate your time and expertise. This was very beneficial, and maybe we can continue to do these on a semi-regular basis as issues arise. So thank you very much, Jenny, and thank you to everyone who listened in and participated today. Have a great day.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Robin.